Welcome to the second episode of the 2021 growth season. The first episode was all about preparation and all the things you'll need for what we're going to do today, which is planting hot pepper seeds. For those of us that don't live in tropical climates, we need to try to stretch our growing season as long as possible. So that's why we start growing inside about 2 or 3 months before we plan on transplanting outside. 2 to 3 months seems to be the ideal balance between giving your plants a good head start without becoming root bound and stalling out. Depending on where you live, you'll want to experiment with the amount of time that works best for you. It's not an exact science, and every year it will be a little bit different. To get a rough idea, first figure out when you want to be planting outside. It should be when the outside temps are consistently above 50. That's the golden rule. I do it around 55 degrees, which is usually around Mother's Day. And it makes it pretty easy to remember. I sow on Valentine's Day and I transplant on Mother's Day. As of this posting, I still have 20% off coupons going for seeds on 86peppers.com, as well as the custom 3-pack where you pick any 3 seeds that I offer for the price of 2. The preparation is the most important part of this whole thing. There is so much room for error here, so you'll want to be as careful and as organized as possible. I'll be growing in a 200 cell propagation tray. I'll also demo growing in plastic cups known as the double cup method. Please watch the first episode if you're considering which method to choose. Since I'm reusing some of my equipment from last year, I made sure to spray it all down with a bleach solution of 1 part bleach to 10 parts water. This includes my 10-20 tray, the seedling tray, the label stakes, and all the spray bottles and watering cans. Who knows what's living in these things? I've already mapped out my outdoor raised beds and plotted where each plant will go. This tells me exactly how many seeds I'll need, how many trays and holes, and what labels to print. I've also marked my super hots in yellow, so those will be the ones that I'll plant today. I'm planting 5 seeds for every 1 plant. I've printed out the labels for the stakes, which is tedious work, but it has to be done eventually, so I might as well do it now. I'm only printing 1 label per breed of plant for now, so it's not that bad. And at least this year, I'll be able to easily tell what plant has sprouted or not. Last year, I just used numbers on the stakes, and it was a real pain to have to consult the chart just to see what was what. And I use a black and white laser printer on Avery waterproof labels. All the products are in the description. And we're all set here. We have the tray, the seed starting mix, our water bottle, our seeds, don't forget the seeds, and our stakes. Avery seems to have changed their formula for their waterproof labels. Last year, they were awesome and they stuck to everything. They seem to keep peeling up, so I'm going to use them, but you might want to look for something else. I'll be starting with the double cup method first. We won't be using the seed starting mix. We'll be using the straight Pro Mix because they're going to live in this cup throughout the entire time they're in the basement. A less costly alternative to the Pro Mix would be a mix of regular compost and perlite. Head over to your big box stores and you'll want to look for basic compost without any fertilizer or fancy amendments, since we'll be using our own later on. You can even use basic topsoil if you want. You're just looking for dirt at this point. And don't forget the perlite. This will help prevent soil compaction. Mix about a half tablespoon in a solo cup worth of soil. I used this combo for the 2020 season and it worked out just fine. I just didn't want to bother with all the mixing this year and I opted for the ready-to-use Pro Mix. So here's the deal with the double cup method. You want 1 cup for the dirt, and you want it to go inside another cup. And what you're going to do is you're going to put a little bit of water in here, and it's going to sit above. Now what you can do is you can put a rock in here if you have 2 of the same type of cups. This way it sits above and it doesn't nest all the way in like that. Another thing you can do is get 1 square bottom and 1 round bottom cup. And then this way they naturally sit above and they won't nest that deep inside there, giving you a reservoir at the bottom. I couldn't find any of these, so I ended up going with 16-ounce cups, and these are 18-ounce. So when this one's inside that one, the bottom of it is right about here, and that's a nice little water reservoir right there. The only thing with going with this method is that the bottoms are kind of small and they can easily tip over. So enter the 3.5-inch cup, put it in there, now it's a little bit more stable. We'll see. Now for the cup that the soil is going into, you want to have 4 holes at the bottom of the cup. So take your cup and some scissors and just cut them off. What's going to happen is you're sort of going to starve the plant for water a little bit at the beginning to force the roots to grow through and grow out of the cup. The roots are then going to dangle into the water. Very little water, once that happens, very little water is actually going to go into the soil, which is really cool. You don't have to worry about bugs or mold or anything. And it's a really nice system. It also prevents the plant becoming root bound because the roots are going to keep growing and swirling along the bottom of the cup. It's pretty cool. I'm going to use 5 cups and I'm going to plant maybe 3 seeds in each cup so that I could just pick the best seed. What other people do is they'll just start with 1 cup and put 5 or 6 seeds in and then transplant the ones out. Before you put any seeds in, label your plants. I already know these are all Hobbs, and these are the only plants I'm growing in the double cut method. Put your stake in first before you do anything. An inside look into the 86 Peppers factory. Here you go. That's what it looks like when right before I fulfill your order, I find your seed, I throw a baggie in there, and send it off. There's an inside look. Okay, so these seeds, if you see any seeds with black dots in the middle of them, don't use them. I do my best to remove those when people buy them. Sometimes a few slip through the cracks, of course, but that's a good example right there. Don't use that guy. So this is pretty much how I do it, and 3 very close to the center because I'm going to leave the best one that's growing, the healthiest, the strongest, and I'm just going to snip the other 2, and that will be my plant that stays in here. It's a good idea to leave all the seeds out on the surface, and then when you're all done planting that plant, then push them all in. You don't want to forget if you put seeds in one and then you end up double planting, it's a mess. And I only push them down maybe 1/8 of an inch, just so they barely go under the surface. Once these germinate and they sprout, you want to cut back a little bit on the water. And eventually, once you see the roots starting to peek out, you can stop watering from the top. And then you're going to water from the bottom. We'll get into that in the next video once things start germinating. And what I want is to see the water start coming through into the cup. At least I know it's getting through and it's saturating. Make sure that if you see any seeds float to the top, poke them back down. I think I got a seed right there. I like to make sure that there's just a little bit of water in there, nothing crazy. You don't want the water to be sitting in there. You don't want it to be sitting in water so that it doesn't drain through. Because again, that would be too wet. Regular sandwich baggies, and you want to just cover them up. I don't like to zip them closed. I like to let a little bit of oxygen get around and in because they do need oxygen. All right, so these guys are good to go. We're gonna do the seed trays now, and we're not gonna use the Pro Mix. We're gonna use that again once we transplant these guys into our 3.5-inch trays. So they're gonna go from here to these once they get a little bit bigger, and then they're going to stay in these while they're downstairs. We're going to fill these up with the Pro Mix. But for this, we're going to use the seed starting mix because it's cheaper, and I don't know. That's what I do. I guess if you wanted to, you could use the Pro Mix in here, but I just like this stuff. So that one's going to go here, and where I'm going to know that these 5 are my King Nagas. Over here, we're going to do the same thing, and I'm going to know that these 5 are my Death Spirals. I have 11 different breeds of plants here, and what I'm going to do once this is all done is take a picture of it with my phone because I don't trust these labels at all. This way, I'll have it in case. Look at this guy, he's already falling off. An important thing, don't pack down the dirt. Just put it in there, maybe give it a couple taps. Don't pack it in solid. Same with this. And I just kind of run my hands over just to make it fall into place. Get rid of any big chunks or twigs or something you might find in there. Okay, now we put the stakes in. Please don't forget that. Really important. Double check. The beauty of these is that I just put one seed in a cell so that when it comes time to transplant, I just pop the little plug out and put it in the bigger cups. Somewhere in between the double cup method and a 200 cell tray would be something like this. It's a 12 cell tray with its own little cup, its own little tray, and you could use that to germinate too. All the seeds are planted. They're sitting on top. Remember, I didn't sink any of them yet because you don't want to sink a row and forget that you did it and then start mixing and crossing, because it's really easy to get screwed up here because the cells are so small. So now I'm just going to go through, I'm going to sink them down and spray them. Make sure whatever you're using isn't wet. You don't want the seed to stick to it and then you accidentally drop it into the next cell. We're going to pour a little bit of water in here, just enough so it sits right above these little ridges here. You don't want to have too much. It's going to soak in from the bottom. And you can see there's water coming through there, which is perfect. You just want it to soak up. You want it to be damp. And there's a fine balance. So with this stuff, the seed starting mix, what happens is when you start spraying, the water's going to puddle up on the top. Don't worry about it. It's going to sink down. You just don't want to put too much water in. Gently spray it so that you don't end up blowing the dirt and the seeds out. Give it a gentle spraying first. And then as it starts to get wet, you can just kind of lay into it a little bit more. And so that's pretty good for now. Err on the side of it being less wet. You want it moist. And every day, just check on it. You'll probably have to give it a squirt or two in there, and just make sure it's at the desired wetness. And you can always take that out and take the water out. If it gets too wet, you'll figure it out. Don't forget to take a picture. And the dome goes over. Make sure it snaps in there. And I like to leave these open just about halfway. I'll do a little bit less than that because you need oxygen. You can't have it completely sealed off. And that's pretty much it for that. And this is about 16 hours later. We have some condensation on the dome, which is great. For best results, knowing the temperature of your soil will help. Keep the soil above 65 degrees, but no hotter than 95 degrees. They say soil temps of 80 degrees is optimal for germination. So get yourself a probe and check the soil throughout the day. They even sell fancy soil temperature gizmos if you want. I just use a regular, like a cooking thermometer. If you need to raise the temperature, you can get a heat mat. This one here is about $14 on Amazon. It's the one I use. It's plug and play, so you just plug it in and it's on, and I leave it on 24/7. This one raises the temperature about 10 to 15 degrees. Depending on how hot you keep your house, you might not need a heat mat at all. They do not need light until they start sprouting. Your seedlings should start to emerge within 1 to 4 weeks. Generally, the hotter the pepper, the longer it takes. Since I'm planting 5 seeds of the same breed, they're all going to come up at different times. If I don't see any germination after 3 weeks, then it's likely something went wrong. Bad seeds can happen, but if you're planting 4 or 5 of the same type and none of them germinated, it's likely something else. 2 of the most popular causes in my experience are either the soil being too wet or too dry, or it could be that the soil was either too cold or too hot. Last season, I had some leftover seeds and actually practiced germinating a couple times. Once I found the system that worked for me, I felt much more confident that when the time came to do it for real, I wouldn't waste any time having to start over.